and boiled and smelled
Ooh.
delicious. Mr. Rabbit stopped and looked around his house. Piles of corn, carrots, turnips, apples, and
Are you gonna be benevolent? Nice.
potatoes surrounded him. He suddenly
he was hoarding, literally hoarding all the food the other animals have been searching for.
That we have cultivated in them. They think it's a little arrogant to, what, you're throwing him food?
Yes.
All right, amazing. Leave it all in.
In the United States, we celebrate this week Thanksgiving. I love Thanksgiving. Just the name alone has made me fall in love with it since I was a child. This has to be the most universal of American holidays. If you talk about inclusive, how could you be more inclusive than giving thanks?
I mean, I can think of a couple ways, especially trying to say that a bounty being shared between colonizers and the people they've colonized, and then deciding that that should be a celebration worth celebrating. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, teach their own.
Thanksgiving, giving thanks. Actually, right now in America, since there is such a desire to undo American and Western civilization on the part of people calling themselves progressives, or better known as woke, it's very sad.
Chats, you woke? You woke? Hell yeah. Woke as fuck. The woke. Here come the woke. Those who are aware.
And I won't get into that now.
Get woke,
but
chat.
even this holiday has been under attack.
Get woke as fuck.
Because its origins lie with the first settlers to America, the Pilgrims, having a legendary meal with Native Americans known as Indians.
Legendary.
People on the
Apparently, these so-called progressives, woke, if you will. Yes, they call themselves the woke. Yes. They'll tell you that apparently these individuals go by different terms now. Indigenous, Native American. They're called Indians. I just wanted everyone to know that. Yeah, let's just keep that going.
left are unhappy that it portrays amity between the Europeans who came over and the indigenous.
Okay, so let's get one thing out of the way. I am completely fine with people celebrating with their family and having a day off work and eating delicious foods. That's fucking based and fun. Do that. Let's have more of it. Let's have more statutory holidays. Let's have more days off to spend more time with our family, have more time to eat the turkey and the mashed potatoes and all that kind of stuff. Ain't no problem with that. What I have a problem is historical revisionism to support racists and white supremacists by ignoring the reality of the situation, what actually took place, and then trying to do this whitewashing of history that Thanksgiving at the end of the day, well, it's in fact a reference to when both sides decided that they were going to join together and give thanks to each other in the bounty of the harvest and eat with each other. And yeah, they lived peacefully ever after. That's about it. There's a great interview. I can't remember if it was on Citation Needed recently, where they interviewed one of the guys who wrote the book on the real history of Thanksgiving, how the entire thing was really blown out of a footnote, which is rare. He's like, in history, you'll never see this, but like footnotes in books are rarely used and then extrapolated to become actual historical events. That doesn't happen, but this is one of the most famous footnotes in history because of footnotes speaking about whether or not there was a sharing of food between the Pilgrims and at the time the Indians they were colonizing, their words not mine. You'll see it in the footnote reference, and then that got blown up into this was a phenomenon that was happening once a year, where there was suddenly like a secession of arms and a ceasefire, and there was no longer both sides trying to attack each other, and they would just join together to live in harmony and eat food. That's all a myth. That never happened. It's made up. They were actively being genocided at that time. And that this myth got propagated and eventually turned into a holiday under the auspices that this entire thing was simply, well, it's a bounty, it's a harvest, and it's a joining together of both sides that happened. It's a really beautiful thing when two sides decide to... One side is trying to colonize and genocide the other side in this equation. If you want to turn it into some like little Disney cartoon, like that's honestly honestly sick. Like, rather than even explain it or talk about it, it's like, just let's sit there and then be like, yeah, this is what happened. This was history, you know? And then we civilized them because, again, they were savages and cannibals who ate each other. And so we civilized them. They got NyQuil, they got roads, and life's been better ever since for everybody, right? So there you are.
Indigenous peoples. Theoretically, there was supposed to be a hatred of the indigenous people from the outset, and the idea that they actually could enjoy one another even for a meal is perhaps anathema to these.
From the outset, do you know what colonization is? They were being colonized. Yes, strangers from another country arrived on their land. They were the stewards of that land, and they started to build enclaves and fucking barracks, and then they started killing them. And the diseases that they brought over with them ended up slaughtering vast amounts of people. We're talking fucking millions and millions and millions. I mean, by most estimates, it's the largest genocide in human history. This whole idea that it's like, oh, well, people won't even allow themselves a day to enjoy the cartoonish character that I have in my brain of both, you know, the indigenous people and the pilgrims just enjoying eating food together, breaking bread. Why can't we ever just talk our problems out, you know?
I have my culture. I'm thankful that my elders kept our culture alive all these years. I'm thankful to be indigenous, resilient, and alive.
I'm thankful for us all to be able to stand together, stand strong, and stand as one.
Happy Thanksgiving, America.
I'm not here to shit on Thanksgiving or the idea of a holiday with your family. Let's have more of those. Let's have more. Let's have more holidays. Let's have more time off where people can meet and have fun and relax and not have to worry about, you know, the burden of having to clock in and clock out every single day, especially if you have a mundane job that you hate. That's a beautiful, amazing thing. What I don't want is to teach people some kind of ahistorical myth. That's the part that is being called out. That's the part that's being called out by the left. Not the concept of, hey, should you have time with your family to eat delicious foods and you know, your mom's stuffing and all that? Of course you should. That's a beautiful thing. I mean,
I'm guessing that you picked the story you want me to read today? Yes. Well, then let's read. Okay, wait. Wait, he says. It looks like he's getting something. And thank you. What is it? A turnip. Wow, well, I've never tried a turnip before, but maybe I'll just add it to our beautiful table here. Okay, I will read. Thanks, buddy. Are you ready to read? Yes. Let's read Mr. Rabbit's Thanksgiving Dinner. Once upon a time, old Mr. Rabbit sat in front of his little house, eating a ripe and juicy turnip. It was a cold, frosty day, and he was wrapped in his favorite wool muffler. The wind whistled through his whiskers, but Mr. Rabbit was nice and warm. Earlier that morning, he had started off, lippity-clippity, down the little path covered with shiny red leaves to go to Farmer Dwyer's corn patch. Mr. Rabbit soon found 3 fat ears of corn and dropped them into his bag. A little further down, he found some purple turnips, yellow carrots, and quite a few russet apples. Old Mr. Rabbit then went into Farmer Dwyer's barn and filled the rest of his bag with potatoes. He also grabbed a few eggs to make some pudding. Mr. Rabbit then started off toward home again when he...
I think the word found is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, especially if we're talking specifically about maize or corn. Obviously a food that was well known to indigenous peoples. In fact, I believe the Inca had so many different varieties. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's one of those things that is now the basis for the majority of our food, including high fructose corn syrup that gives us all the energy we need to succeed in society.
Came to his little house, he emptied his bag and arranged his harvest in piles around his front room. Corn in one heap, carrots in another, turnips, apples, and potatoes. He then beat the eggs and put his pudding on the stove. Mr. Rabbit then went outside, thinking what a clever rabbit he was. As he sat in his warm muffler in front of his house, Munching on the turnip, he heard a little noise in the leaves. "Good morning, Billy Chipmunk," Mr. Rabbit greeted. "Why are you running so fast?" "Because I'm cold and hungry," Billy Chipmunk replied. "It's going to be a very hard winter with no apples. I've been looking all morning and haven't found one."
I used to know where there was a good deposit of corn, and that's what I was depending on to live, and I went there today and it was all gone, Mr. Rabbit. Do you know anything about that?
Billy Chipmunk went chattering by, his fur standing straight up in the wind. In no time, Molly Mouse came creeping along the path.
I mean, I'll give it to them. If this whole thing was supposed to be a metaphor for colonization, they actually might be nailing it for the very first time ever. Mr. Rabbit set up on their land and built a house, and then quickly went to grabbing all of their local resources, pooled them, and then kept them into his home, hoarding them all, if you will. At which point, all of the other animals around started coming up to Mr. Rabbit asking, where did all the food go? What happened to all the food?
Her long gray tail swishing and swirling all the shiny red leaves. "Good morning, Molly Mouse," Mr. Rabbit greeted, taking another bite of his crunchy turnip. "Good morning," Molly Mouse answered in a small, weak voice. "Oh, Mr. Rabbit," she continued, "what a very hard winter it will be. I've been looking and looking for an ear of corn, but it has all been harvested." Molly Mouse shook her tiny head and then trotted out of sight. Pretty soon, Mr. Rabbit heard somebody else coming down the path, hopping around and making a great to-do. "Good morning, Tommy Chickadee," Mr. Rabbit exclaimed. But Tommy Chickadee just chirped and scolded because he was too cold and couldn't find a single crumb or berry to eat. He then flew away, feathers puffed.
So, I mean, I guess if we just want to take this at face value, everyone else sucks at foraging. Like, Mr. Rabbit is one hell of a fucking forager, you know, S-tier foraging. Just fucking found everything right away. Put it all inside the home.
Out and looking like a round ball, chattering and scolding more. Old Mr. Rabbit finished his turnip, eating every single bit of it. He then went inside to check his pudding cooking on the stove. It bubbled and boiled and smelled delicious. Mr. Rabbit stopped and looked around his house. Piles of corn, carrots, turnips, apples, and
Are you gonna be benevolent? Nice.
potatoes surrounded him. He suddenly
he was hoarding, literally hoarding all the food the other animals have been searching for. They all come by like all cold and hungry too. It's like, I was searching all day for corn. It was all gone. I don't know what happened. Mighty fine story, I hear. Well, hope you good best luck on that one.
had a funny idea. Different than any other idea he ever had before. Mr. Rabbit took off his warm muffler and put on his apron. He spread his best red tablecloth on his table and set his table with his fancy gold dinner set. By the time he was done, the pudding was cooked and steaming, so he set it in the middle of his table. Then he piled heaps of corn, carrots, turnips, apples, and potatoes all around the sweet pudding. Next, old Mr. Rabbit took down his rusty dinner bell. He had seldom rung it before. He stood in his front doorway, rang it very hard, and called.
So you can see what the problem here is, right? If there's one person, kind of like a dictator, if you will, who's capable of just hoarding all of the resources and then deciding when they, when a fantastic and whimsical idea befalls them to decide to maybe show some generosity and feed others, how putting all that control in the hands of Mr. Rabbit could be a bad thing. Like, what happens on the days that Mr. Rabbit isn't feeling whimsical and magical?
Dinner's ready! Come to dinner! Billy Chipmunk and Molly Mouse and Tommy Chickadee. One by one they came and brought their friends with them. Tommy Chickadee brought Rusty Robin, who had a broken wing and could not fly south for the winter. Billy Chipmunk brought cheddar cheese.
And by the way, this reinforces like everything that, you know, really extreme hardline Christian capitalists want to reinforce, which is that like some people are going to work harder than others, and some people are going to be more successful than others. And those who work hard, play by the rules, and do everything as they're supposed to will have a bounty. That's just natural. They're going to be very, very successful. But the good thing is, because they are, again, generous, they're going to help out others, the less fortunate than them, but also, we'll be honest, the lazy. So they can help the lazy, and that's how the whole system works.
A lame squirrel who he had invited to share his hole for a few months. And Molly Mouse brought a young gentleman field mouse.
Oh yeah, if someone wanted to have fun with this, any animators, you could easily just do an alternative ending where everyone just arrives here and then they just eat the rabbit. Like as soon as they're all in the room, he's like, look what I've prepared for you. And then they're like, yeah, yourself.
Who looked very distinguished with long whiskers. They all stumbled into old Mr. Rabbit's house and forgot their manners. They began eating as fast as they could.
Oh, those silly savages, you know, no manners, no decorum.
Mr. Rabbit became so busy waiting on all of them that he didn't have any time to eat a bite of dinner himself.
Oh my God. So, the rest of the animals in the forest that are all starving because you took all the fucking food. That was the first fucking salvo. It opens with Mr. Rabbit hoarding all the resources, and then all of a sudden, yeah, all these starving people he invites into his home, well, they're a bit of a brute, you know? Yeah, not proper etiquette. Yeah, didn't know you're supposed to, oh, actually, you're supposed to use the small fork at the very end. The larger fork on the outside of the table, was you work your way inwards, yes. No, that one is not a soup spoon. No. Okay, that's a pudding spoon. Keep the pudding spoon above the plate. And if you are going to have to get small fragments of soup with your soup spoon, be sure to demonstrate by lifting the plate towards the other guests, yes, lest you be a savage and a brute.
Made him feel full inside. When everyone finished,
wow. I mean, he did have food in that picture. You could have just had an empty plate, but yeah, he doesn't need food, right? He has benevolence. Benevolence is definitely more filling.
Tommy Chickadee hopped up.
He was probably eating fucking all day and couldn't stand it anymore. And he was like, all this shit's gonna go to waste. All right, come in, Pores. Open the door. Pores, you can have some. Get in here.
On the back of his chair and chirped. 3 cheers for old Mr. Rabbit's Thanksgiving dinner. Hooray, hooray, hooray. They all
Huzzah!
twittered and chattered. And old Mr. Rabbit was so surprised that he thought fondly about this moment though.
Yeah, this is fucking a dictatorship, you know? This is Animal Farm, but instead of being about the communist revolution right now, we're just about like the rise of Mussolini.
Whole next week. You see, he had given a Thanksgiving dinner without knowing that it really and truly was Thanksgiving Day.
Holy shit. Wow. Yeah, that was pretty blatant, just the way PragerU phrased the entire thing. Everything from, look at the successful Mr. Rabbit, he's got a house, he's got a car, he's actually made something of himself. He put in the time at the start of the day to collect and hoard all of the food that all the rest of the forest depended on, and then once he received and saw that every single other person in the forest was starving and couldn't find any, he in his benevolence decided to allow them inside, and even though they were a little bit savage, a little bit wild, they had no manners, you know, not proper English manners, he was still capable of feeding them all because he's such a good person, and he was filled with joy from the very act.
The end.
The day known as the Thanksgiving Day Massacres. On June 5th, Captain Mason attacks a Pequot village near present-day Stonington and massacres the entire community. Following an especially successful raid against the people that were originally there, in Connecticut, the churches announced the second day of, quote, Thanksgiving to celebrate the victory. Reportedly, during the feasting, the hacked-off heads of natives are kicked through the streets like soccer balls. On July 28th, a third massacre and a massacre occur near present-day Fairfield in what is known as the Pequot War, and it comes to an end. The day after the massacre, William Bradford, the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, writes that from this day forth shall be a day of celebration and thanksgiving for subduing the savage people, and for the next 100 years, every Thanksgiving Day ordained by a governor was in the honor of the bloody victory, thanking God that the battle had been won. This event marks the first actual Thanksgiving. During this period in history, the Puritans and other English colonists generally declared the day of Thanksgiving to celebrate the successful massacre of native communities and to honor the victories ordained by God rather than celebrating successful harvests. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. This show is produced by amazing people like you, and if you want to help us out, please consider donating over at patreon.com/theserfs. The show is made possible thanks to Amazing Fletch, Anna Loves Riley, Ariane McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, La Media Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Omni, Peanut Butter Blondie, Political Pappy, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Ruby K, Sir Nickus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Demo, Tech Tink, Trevbot EXE, Words Greenwood, and not to mention all of the amazing and fabulous people you now see before you.